Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Might I have your attention, please? My name's John Locke, and I'm very pleased to be here and to be invited and have a chance to talk about the Magna Carta group. That's what people refer to us. There are many different groups in the so-called freedom movement, and most people will refer to us as the Magna Carta group, or the Article 61ers. So we're going to be talking a lot, a bit. The main theme of this is going to be principles. We live in basically an unprincipled society at the moment, where for many decades there have been forces trying to get people to abandon principles that previously stood society in good stead, and get people to believe that all truth is relative, there are no absolute values, these type of things. Most of us here are senior enough to sort of remember those days and see those changes happening. So first thing I've got here is it's not what we don't know that makes us ignorant, it's what we don't want to know. So there are many people, and I'm sure everybody in the room would have some experience of this, where you've tried to talk to people about the bad things that are happening in the community, especially emanating from the government, from police, from public servants, from different groups that we were taught to regard as authorities. But we can see that they don't always work to our benefit. So when we try to talk to people about this, there's a very large number that just really aren't interested. They don't want to talk about it because it makes them feel uncomfortable. They'd rather talk about the football or other things which are distractions, things which in the overall scheme of things don't mean a great deal. So let's move on. We want to talk about basic principles, basic things. What are rights? Where does law come from? Okay, so these are questions that we cover. There are two types of rights. There are natural ones, which are negative rights. In other words, can everybody read these, or I can read them off?
Yep.
Okay. We need freedom to seek our survival needs. We're born with these things, right? Every living thing that comes into existence, whether it's a plant, an animal, or a human, all have these things. We need to be free from assault or coercion, from fraud or deception. We need to be free from theft, or we need freedom of speech. We need to be able to express our ideas without being censored. We need freedom of movement. Otherwise, how can we make the most use of our resources, whether they're personal or things that we've acquired or produced? We need freedom of association. We should be able to associate with whomever we choose and not be compelled to join groups with whom we have no common interest. We need freedom to own property, including ourselves. Ourselves is our major source of property. There's a John Locke that lived about 350 years ago, probably most of you have heard of him, and he said that every man has in his own person a property, and that is his and his alone, to do with as he wishes. Then we've also got legal rights. These are, we term them as positive because they're granted to us, right? These things we're born with. Everybody has these when the moment they're born. These other ones, things like people would say, well, I've got a right to an education, or a right to free healthcare, a right to government welfare or home and shelter, a right to food and clothing, a right to a minimum wage, a right to silence or censor opponents. I should have a right to public transport, a right to subsidised childcare. There's an endless list of those things. These can only be granted by some authoritative body. But when they're granted, of course, the other side of that coin is they can also be taken away. These rights here, we stand firmly and say they cannot be taken away. If someone tries to take these away, then they're breaking the natural law, what we would call natural law, these things exist in and of themselves. They don't need to be granted. They don't impose any demands or cost on anyone else. They can only be removed by force, deception or consent. Being part of nature, they're immutable or eternal. So natural laws are immutable, laws of like physical laws. We can't break those no matter how hard we try. Right? We have to comply with those. These natural rights are the same. So when you get a group of people that all agree on these things, that we should be free to live without hurting each other, without deceiving and harming each other, then those laws will eventuate from that. The ones that we talked about here, the positive ones, they have to be granted, they can be removed, they can be manipulated by power brokers to secure wealth and influence, or to get people to vote for them and to give them positions of power and influence. So law then is a derivative of rights. Where there's general agreement about rights, law will follow. And rights become recognised when people follow their consciences, realising that others desire or need the same considerations that they afford themselves. That's the origin of natural or common law, which is enshrined in any lawful constitution. I'm not going to read all of this stuff, don't worry about that.
Can everybody hear, John?
Can everybody hear?
Yep.
Yep, okay. This is just a brief history of English law. In the Dark Ages, England was ruled by what we might term warlords. They had different kingdoms and they called themselves kings. But it was eventually united under Alfred the Great, who still remains the only monarch in English history that does get the appellation great. He was very well educated, classically educated, and he realised that the common law needed to be sort of codified. He went and visited the people, spoke with them, and the common law evolved. And the common law has been evolving for thousands of years, not just in England, but in different cultures. And of course, in different cultures, the common law might be slightly different, depends on the religious beliefs they have and so forth. But in England, which was basically a Christian country, then those common laws about protecting each other's rights, they were there already. Alfred just made it a sort of an official type of thing. Now, this is an important question that people need to cover. A lot of people, when we talk to them, after we've spoken to them for a little while, we realise that they don't really understand the difference between lawful and legal. Okay, so lawful things stem from natural law, which binds all people equally. They're immutable, they're not susceptible to change or amendment, and they form the basis of common law. It overrides statute law. Lawful, something that's lawful, like a constitution, overrides statute law. It defines constitutional law and protects individual rights. On the other hand, legal things, they consist of statutory legislation passed by a parliament or congress of representatives. They can be changed by any succeeding administration. It favours one-size-fits-all judicial processes and punishments. So when we get into, so if someone's hauled into a magistrate's court, for example, there's very, very little consideration of the actual circumstances leading up to why you were there. It's just, well, this is what you did. Policeman says that. We believe him, not you. So the punishment is the same for everybody. Okay. Under a lawful system, which we'll come to, then that will be considered. All those things will be considered. Now, Magna Carta 1215, called the Great Charter or the Great Charter of Liberties, that arose because we had a king that was a tyrant. At that time was King John, and he was committing all sorts of crimes, having people murdered and tortured. But the real thing that got people going, and was the barons, was the fact that he went too far with the taxation. Basically, that's what's going to happen here. They're just going to go to the point where they take too much money off people, and people are going to say, no, that's enough. What can we do about this? So the barons got King John and they got him to do the Magna Carta. And that's only one article, which is on the back of the sheet that you have there. I'm not going to read all that, but just a couple of the bits in the yellow are probably the important bits, where it says that if the monarch breaks the agreement with the people, then a committee of barons can be appointed, and they can, together with the whole realm, distrain and distress the crown after it's been reported to the monarch, and they've had 40 days to fix things up. If they don't fix it up, then the barons and the people can unite and refuse to comply with the directions of the monarch or their agents. And it says down the bottom here that this is to be enjoyed in perpetuity. In the future, if anybody, the monarch or any other party, tries to bring something into existence which revokes or diminishes these liberties which are protected, then it should be null and void. So that's an important point we'll come back to. So basically the question comes up, well, who can write a constitution? And the answer is virtually anyone other than the government, or everyone other than the government. The government cannot be allowed to write the constitution. And the reason for that's obvious. They're the ones who are enforcing it. They've got a monopoly on force. You can't have a body like that writing the rules and enforcing them because, well, that's dictatorship, isn't it? That's the definition. So I've covered a couple of those there. Basically, the Constitution binds the government. It doesn't bind the people. The people are we're technically free to do whatever we like, as long as we don't hurt other people. And that includes in our own personal affairs, or even if we're running a big corporation, we should be accountable if what we're doing is polluting the environment, for example, and causing other people harm via that method. How the people retain power under the Constitution is through trial by jury. It's not through voting. We'll come to that in a minute about voting. But under trial by jury, which was established in Magna Carta in Article 39, which you'll find on there as well, we are not supposed to be distressed or have anything taken from us or any sort of punishment given to us at all until we've been before a jury of our peers and they've given a judgment according to the law of the land. The law of the land is the common law, not the legislation. So when somebody brings a complaint against another person, so this person's done harm to me, they go before a jury. They're supposed to go before a jury, not a magistrate or a judge. Those type of things are completely unlawful and unconstitutional. So the jury under this system decides what is admissible as evidence, and they're the judges, right? They may be assisted on points of law by an elected or appointed convener, someone who is familiar with the law. Sometimes there'll be points of law the jury won't be quite clear on. But the jurors judge the facts of the case and the justice, or otherwise, of the legislation that flagged the case. The jury decides the verdict and the sentence, if any. The jury may annul the legislation and acquit someone technically guilty of a breach of the legislation which brought that case. A single jury may bring a publicly funded court action against legislators, either singularly or in the plural, for any damage caused by unconstitutional legislation that they enact. So this is where the people really have the power to control the government. The government could pass any law they like they've been doing in the last few years. Mm. If we had trial by jury, the system that was established, then that person, someone would be charged with, hey, you're out in the street without wearing a mask, hauling you into court. The jury could say, well, yeah, he may not been wearing a mask, but we don't think that that's really important. So we're going to acquit this person, even if they're technically guilty. And that would apply to any sort of case or legislation that the government produced. And that would really, when you think about it, that really limits what the government can do. They can't enforce bad legislation as long as you've got trial by jury. So was the system that was existing, and immediately that Magna Carta came into effect, in the same year the Bar Association was formed. King John had some supporters, all tyrants have got some supporters who think they can do okay if the guy stays in power. But the Bar Association was set up to work around and sort of find ways around the provisions of Magna Carta to remove, and one of the first things they did, by about 1270, 1280, there was no more trial by jury as such. There were only people who were landowners could be on juries. Technically everybody should be able to be on a jury who's an adult, but that's one of the first things they did, and it's gradually just been weakened and weakened over the centuries. So now when we talk about a trial by jury, there's a judge who tells the jury what to think and what to do, which is really, when you think about it, just a farce. It's a mockery of justice. Let's move on a bit. I'm not going to spend much time on this. The treaty and the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights was something that came up. The Magna Carta was a primary constitutional document, but there were some changes were attempted to be made, but this was a period of political unrest. You know, King Charles I had been executed a few years before. I don't want to spend much time talking about that because we can go into that at another time, and I've got videos that deal with that on the website. This one about the Australian Constitution, it is important because there are a great many people in Australia who, having been woken up by the COVID scam, are looking to the Australian Constitution for answers, how to deal with this. But this Constitution was written by the UK Parliament. So it was produced, if we refer back to Article 61, by a third party, but with the assistance of the monarch at the time, Queen Victoria, and it does not provide the freedoms, does not protect the freedoms that we have under Magna Carta. In section 71, the power is given directly to the federal government to appoint judges and to whatever courts that they want to set up. So there is no provision in the Australian Constitution for how do you get rid of or deal with the government if it goes rogue. There isn't any, there's nothing like Article 61 there. But the point that is missed is that Magna Carta is the Constitution for the whole British Commonwealth. Did anybody watch the coronation recently, or the fake coronation? I know it was pretty boring. I tuned in just to watch the bit where they were putting the crown on it. So I just wanted to see what Charles looked like. And so it was a good laugh. But that he swore in that oath, when he did his oath, to govern according to the laws and customs of the people. Right. The actual coronation oath that he was supposed to swear, which was set up under the Bill of Rights, says that the monarch should govern according to the acts and statutes of Parliament. Totally different thing. But Charles left that out. That was left out, and maybe for distracted reasons to distract people. But he's supposed to rule the whole Commonwealth under the laws and customs of the people, which is the common law. That's Magna Carta. All the legislation, anything that contradicts the Constitution is invalid. Article 61 tells us that. A lot of people will say, oh, lots of the Magna Carta has been revoked, or it's been annulled. That's not possible because it was a treaty that was sealed before Parliament came into existence. So if you've got a contract or an agreement between two parties, there's no lawful way that a third party can come in and start interfering with that. So that's one of the problems that that stems from people's belief in the Australian Constitution. It's not valid. We're under the British Constitution of Magna Carta, which affords us much greater freedoms and enables us to withstand lawfully the imposts and all these mandates and things that are being forced upon us. I'm just going to gloss over these quickly. Democracy, remember I said I'd refer to this, it's not voting in elections or in referenda. All those things lead eventually to a totalitarian type of government, because it's just a contest about, it's an auction of future stolen goods. Yeah. That's what elections are. So eventually, as people gradually become weakened by the grasping sort of hands of government, they become more and more likely to vote for extreme measures, and eventually you wind up with, you know, with some form of dictatorship. Even the what's the word I'm thinking of? Just forget that one. Let's move on. We're running short of time. So this picture here is a man called David Robinson. Now, when Magna Carta Article 61 was invoked in 2001, it was as a result of work done by the Magna Carta Society in the UK. And they had been studying for years the different legislation that Queen Elizabeth allowed to pass through the Parliament. Legislation that gave more and more sovereignty to the EU over Britain. Now that contravenes not only the Constitution as Magna Carta, where the monarch swears to uphold our lawful rights, but also there are other acts and statutes that have been passed since, where to grant or cede any sovereignty over Britain or any of the Commonwealth to foreign powers is defined clearly as treason, right? And it's just not allowed. Now, when this was invoked in 2001, that technically deposed Queen Elizabeth. She wasn't any longer the monarch, not constitutionally. And of course, the establishment decided, well, let's keep this quiet. It had to be published under the constitutional law. So it was published in the Daily Telegraph on the day after. But they kept it quiet as much as they could. They thought, well, let's not let people know about this. David Robinson studied all this for many years, and he was assisted by a lady called Elizabeth Beckett, who was the daughter of a High Court judge. And he worked out a series of notices, lawful notices, which we can send to people who make demands on us. There could be, a speeding fine. It could be rates called from the council. It could be a parking fine. It could be anything. Like this current, we've got a referendum coming up. I've received my thing. Probably most of you have, about it's compulsory to vote. We don't vote in those things, and the reason is that if you participate in that, David Robinson and his notices establish the fact that the government is acting unlawfully, that it doesn't have Crown authority. Therefore, if it doesn't have Crown authority, what authority does it have? It only has the authority of a corrupt police force that are being used to enforce these things, instead of doing their proper job of constables. That's another subject we can come to another time. But David Robinson devised these notices, which we place these people, we let them know, look, I'm standing under this Article 61, I've sworn an oath to that, and I can't recognise the jurisdiction that you're claiming. You don't have lawful authority. So therefore, but I will give you an opportunity, if you can prove to me that this wasn't enacted in 2001, if you can prove that that didn't happen, Article 61 is not in effect, well, then of course I'll comply with whatever your demands are. But they're not able to do that. So we give them a couple of opportunities to respond. They never do, or if they do, it's always with some sort of claim that, oh, Magna Carta has been abolished, and then we rebut that. And we go on through 5 notices. We let them know that they're concealing the fact that treason is being committed, and that then we give them a final notice to stop. And mostly they'll a lot of the demands that they make cease about that point. But sometimes they continue to go on. They threaten things like, you know, we're going to impound your motor vehicle, or we'll take your driving licence away if you don't pay the fine. Or we'll send you to court, you've got to go to court. We don't go to courts either. We put the court on notice to say, you have no authority, I'm forbidden by the law to actually step into your jurisdiction. And sometimes, of course, they go as hard and fast as they can. They might say, well, we're going to send bailiffs around to take some of your property. Now, we have had people who've resisted that all the way, and the bailiffs have had to leave. But for most people, that's a very scary prospect. Mm. And if you're in a family and your spouse is not on the same page, that could be problems. That could cause serious damage in your home. So there's the option of complying under duress if they make the threats too onerous. We still say, okay, look, we send them a notice, we'll say, look, I'm going to comply under duress, but all this evidence that we've compiled is going to be in a file. Eventually, trial by jury is going to be re-established, and you will have to stand as an individual. We find out the name of the person who's making the demand on us and tell them they will have to stand as an individual before a jury of their peers to answer for what they did when they were supposed to be acting as a public servant and treating everybody equally and preserving their rights.
And it puts the karma back onto them as well.
Yes, it puts the karma back on, that's true. Now this little section here, this is a web page that our group has up, and in there you can see there are all sorts of sections you can go to. You can find...
There's one of those QR codes.
Yes. So we can find all sorts of information there where, you know, it's impossible to give all this information out in a talk like this. I'm just about running out of my time. So we really got the choice that's facing us is freedom or slavery. We can either just continue going along, letting these things keep the government make more and more impositions on us, or we can understand our power, learn the truth of how to take action, and create the world we want to live in. Now, I've got personal experience with this. We'll go this into the question and answer session. There'll be cases here where we can go into that. This here is a couple of things that are on that website. We're having a campaign where we're sending letters to every police station in Australia and to every council office as well, letting them know and asking them these type of questions. I'm sorry, before we get there, this is the oath that the constables swear. Now it's important to look quickly at that. The sections that are in the sort of pink or red colour, these are things that if we look around at the police officers we see today, are they applying the law without favour or affection, or without malice or ill will? Are they causing His Majesty's peace to be kept and preserved, and that they will prevent to the best of their power all offences against that peace? And the answer really is that they can't say that. We had one of our group ring up one of the police stations last week, and after these letters had been sent out, this particular one hadn't seen the letter or the document. But when we asked who did they work for, she said, oh, we work for the Victorian government. So is that without fear or favour? Aren't they supposed to work for everybody? You know, why? How come the government gets to give them orders? So that's a really important question. We want to bring these things to their attention. This is one of the documents we sent to the police, asking these questions. Are you aware that most of the activity you take part in your shift is criminal, and that you're helping other people commit crimes as well? We ask them all sorts of things. Do you understand that you're breaching your constable's oath? What do you think the effect will be on your family when they realise that you were doing this when you were supposed to be serving the community? And then there's just some QR codes there as well. This one here is questions and information for the council employees. So the same type of thing. So that's as far as I want to go with that at this stage. I don't know if we've got any more. There'll be questions if people want have questions. Well, we're happy to take them. And sorry, yes, Gil.
Is the constable's oath on the screen what they currently sign in Western Australia?
Yes, I got that from the WA site. Yeah, I'll go back to that if you want.
I'm surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should be, because they're all breaking it every day.
I thought they changed it.
In the Police Act, have a look in the Police Act. It's got the oath there.
That's from the Police Act, yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. We'll just close this section of it here because Tony wants to set up a camera for the question and answer session. Okay.